Now we come to a time period we call the Belle Epoque, roughly 1870 to 1914. Belle Epoque, that's a French phrase. It means the beautiful age. And here we have something we haven't made a big deal about in this course, and that's a specific date, 1914. 1870 to 1914. That's because something happens in 1914 that brings a crashing end to this beautiful age, and that is the outbreak of World War I. World War I, 1914 and 1918. Just to remind you, we're heading into a time of crisis, and as Western culture enters into this time of crisis, and I'm going to be arguing later, never emerges out of it, we can expect to see things becoming more and more unusual to us. So keep that in the back of your mind as we look at stuff that comes out of this time period. The first real movement we'll be talking about is Impressionism. And the best place to start with Impressionism is with the painting at the bottom of page 102 in your textbook, figure 16.2, Claude Monet, Impression Sunrise. Now just to clarify before we move on, the last artist that we talked about was Edward Manet. You see Manet's Luncheon on the Grass at the top of page 102. Now we're talking about Monet, Claude Monet. Don't confuse Manet and Monet. Their names are spelled similarly, but they're different artists. Monet's Impression Sunrise, here Manet's... Come on, catch up. There we go. Manet's Luncheon on the Grass. You can keep them apart because Luncheon on the Grass here is a picnic scene. You always have sandwiches at a picnic, and what do you always have on sandwiches? A mayonnaise. Manet's Luncheon on the Grass. That'll help you remember. Well, now on to Monet. Claude Monet, Impression, Sunrise. Arguably, Monet is the first Impressionist painter, and arguably this painting is the first Impressionist painting, because the movement, Impressionism, takes its name from this painting, Impression, Sunrise. When you say that a painting is impressionistic, what that means is that it looks like Impression, Sunrise. We see the scene here, clear enough. You have some fishing boats on the water, the sun in the sky, the sun reflected in the water, the waves on the water, the clouds in the sky, the big ships and the tall ships in the background at the dock. As we look at the painting, though, if we focus, say, on this part of the painting down here, this fishing boat down here, think about this question. Is Monet painting a fishing boat there, or is he painting splotches of greens and grays that your brain blends together and tells you that you're looking at a fishing boat? Of course, he's trying to paint a fishing boat here, but I want you to focus on how he's painting the fishing boat. He's not very carefully sketching out the details of the boat, but instead very quickly putting just the blotches of shape and color that your brain tells you is a fishing boat. On page 103 in your textbook at the top of the page, you have an example from one of the more famous series in the entire textbook, in the entire course, Monet's Water Lily series. Nymphaeas is the fancy title for the series, the Water Lily series. At the top of the page, you have figure 16.3, and at the top of the screen, you have that longer painting. At the bottom, you have a detail from the painting. That's figure 16.3a in your textbook, or at the bottom of the screen. It's a detail of this section of the painting up here. And as you look, actually over here, I guess, as you look at the painting, is Monet painting water lilies, or is he painting splotches of reds and yellows and greens and blues and purples that your brain tells you are water lilies? In other words, he's not carefully sketching out the individual leaves of the lily pads here, but just the raw shape and color. I've got several other examples here of the Water Lily series. You want to recognize Monet's Water Lily series because once you learn what they look like, then you see them all over the place on coffee cups and mouse pads and calendars and all kinds of different places. Again, we just have the raw, blurry details here and not the sharp focused not the sharp focused details, instead just the presentation of the shape and color. And another example here, again, we can make out the scene well enough, but if we look, say, over here in the reflected vegetation reflecting the water, we see that blurry, kind of fuzzy nature that we characterize Impressionism. And another one. My computer is slow for some reason. There we go. These paintings tend to be much larger than you might expect just from the smaller photographs that we have to work with in the course. But here we have a painting. This is, what, maybe 30 feet long? It's actually three different canvases that are attached to each other, usually much larger than you might expect. Here's another one. I'm going to show you a detail of this section of the painting over here. And when I show it to you, here we go. Again, there's no attempt at all to capture the veins and the leaves of the lily pad or the individual petals and the stamens and all that kind of thing of the flower. And as we go back to the painting, I'm going to show you a detail of, there we go, of this part of the painting, as close as I can get it. There we go. And you see the paint laid very thickly on. There's no attempt at all to paint the individual petals or the flower parts, the stamens and pistils and all that stuff you learned in biology class, but just the raw shapes and colors. Here we get to our first characteristic of Impressionism. The first characteristic of Impressionism, let me get that ugly ink stuff off. There. I'm going to be giving you three characteristics of Impressionism, and all of them start with the same phrase, the same kind of tacky phrase, capturing the moment. Capturing the moment. I know that's a kind of a tacky phrase. It sounds like a Kodak commercial, or I guess Kodak went out of business, didn't they? Or a senior high prom theme or something, capturing the moment. But it'll help you remember. And here's the first characteristic of Impressionism, capturing the moment between the time your eye sees an object and your brain tells you what it is. Capturing the moment between the time your eye sees an object and your brain tells you what it is. Now that's just a split second of time. That time goes by so quickly that I'm convinced that most people live their entire lives and never even notice it. But if you pay attention to what's happening in your mind, as you move your eyes around the room, your eyes are bombarded by constant visual data, constantly bombarded with shape, color, location, distance, size, those kinds of things. And then your brain takes all that visual data and organizes it and tells you what it is that you're looking at. As you move your eyes around the room, your eyes get hit with shapes and colors, then in a split second later your brain tells you what it is that you're looking at. The simple way of putting that characteristic is to say that Impressionism breaks the scene down into shapes and colors. No attention to detail, but just the raw shapes and colors. That's what gives us the blurry, fuzzy nature of Impressionist paintings. But I want you to remember that longer, more complex characteristic as well. You may not see why today that's so significant, but by the end of the semester, you'll see why. Bypassing the mind there, going straight to experience and bypassing the mind is a major part of the cultural response to this crisis that we're heading into. Also on page 103, you have another series of paintings by Monet. When my computer catches up to me. There we go. Monet's Rouen Cathedral Series. You see that title in the caption there, Rouen Cathedral Series, R-O-U-E-N. The Rouen Cathedral Series. Let me just show you some. You have three examples in your textbook. Let me show you some as I talk about them. For the Rouen Cathedral Series, Monet goes to a place across the street from this cathedral, and he paints the cathedral several different times. Eventually there'll be 20 official members of the series, but he paints it, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 dozen times as he's working through the series. He paints the cathedral at several different times of the day and under different weather conditions. The same place across the street, the same angle, but the only difference is differences of time and day. Now on the screen you have 3 of them to look at once. You have 3 different ones in your textbook. The only differences being different weather conditions and different times of the day. In other words, different conditions of light. This is the best place to introduce you to the second characteristic of Impressionism. and that is capturing the moment when light, L-I-G-H-T, is doing a particular thing. Capturing the moment when light is doing a particular thing. What you're looking at here is an experiment, kind of like a science experiment. Monet wants to know how the building will look different at different times of the day under different light conditions. Now, of course, everybody knows the building will look different, but Monet wants to quantify how the building is going to look different. And by painting the building at different times of the day, he's able to portray the building, how it changes depending on how the light reflects off the building. And so with Monet now, you have several things to remember. You have Monet's Impression Sunrise, arguably the first Impressionist painting, with Monet the first Impressionist painter. You have his Water Lily series, a very famous series of paintings. You have the Rouen Cathedral series. And by the time we finish with Monet here, we have two of the three characteristics of Impressionism I'll be giving you. We'll pick up that third characteristic of Impressionism with the next Impressionist painter we'll be looking at.